Language is intended to unify speakers, but its arbitrary nature of sliding signifiers is traumatic. Words fail to capture the complexity of emotions. Meaning is distorted, separating speakers. Words introduce loss. The message always slips away. Desire is out of reach because we speak. Jacques Lacan's linguistic theory underscores the paradox of selfhood manifested through language. The subject's sense of itself disintegrates in a system of signs. Although the father in Mirror is largely absent, his poetry appears to structure the son's sense of self. Often the female figures in Mirror act as receptacles or vessels for the masculine word. A sequence in the printing house, for instance, appears driven by the mother's fear that she has let slip a textual error, a terrible mistake for a proofreader to make, since the text in question is the collected works of Joseph Stalin, a man who was repeatedly depicted as the ultimate father figure in Soviet Russia. It is worth bearing in mind that psychoanalysis is not the weaving of narratives. Narratives must be viewed with suspicion, because they erase the element that doesn't fit in, the slip of the tongue, the dream, symptom. For Freud, the object of psychoanalytic inquiry is the waste product of the experiential world, precisely those elements that stick out and irritate the discourse. The phenomenological richness of the knot is more significant than its disentangling. Biographies, for instance, are inconsistent. The biographic narrative glosses over inconsistencies to present a clear running thread. Mirror seeks such a clear running thread initially through a quest for words. The sequence seen before the title credits roll, where a young boy is cured of his stutter, creates the illusion that when the boy speaks out clearly, he enables the beginning of the film. When he proclaims his ability to communicate, "I can speak," he says, he gives the filmic discourse permission to start evolving. Principally, what has been lost is the father, obliquely recovered in the film by the poetry of Arseny Tarkovsky, and here too, what is recovered is language. But the presence of the father's poetry also fills the vacuum created by the father's physical absence, and the mother's visual presence in the film counters the loss of the father. Psychoanalytically speaking, the mind operates as a rebus puzzle. Dream logic takes on a surrealistic, irrational, non-linear form. Much like poems, dreams disobey the established linguistic rules to express meaning. Freud referred to dreams as the royal road to the unconscious because there are fewer censorship barriers operating during sleep, enabling repressed thoughts to become known in the conscious mind. The mirror of the title is the metaphorical looking glass that provides man with a reflection of himself. In its surface, time is refracted, and in its transitional device through which one may pass to other worlds, other states of consciousness appear. Time and space meet in Tarkovsky's mirrors. The multiple identities are scattered throughout the narrative of the film as splinters of a broken mirror. The characters' actions do not obey the rules of chronological sequentiality. Due to their constantly shifting and elusive identities, the notions of space and time as such become the main characters of the film. Freud famously declared, "Everywhere I go, I find that a poet has been there before me." And therefore poetry is the very essence of Mirror. The audience is called to make sense of a chaotic, fragmented set of images and distorted memories. Viewers occupy the position of the developing subject in psychoanalytic theory. Tarkovsky stated, "The logic of poetic links is very pleasing and appropriate to the potential of cinema as the most truthful and poetic of art forms. I prefer them to linear, rigid, logical development of plot. That sort of fussily correct way of linking events usually involves arbitrarily forcing them into sequence in obedience to some abstract notion of order. And even when this is not so, one finds that the links which hold it together rest on a facile interpretation of life's complexities. Lacan defines the mirror stage as the critical phase of the development of subjectivity, occurring between 6 and 18 months. In the mirror stage, the child starts to see an image of itself from outside of itself, successfully identifying his body as his own. Yet the wholeness of the body with which the infant identifies is a mirage. Experienced as an exterior image, unity does not correspond with the infant's lack of physical coordination. Visual space plays a crucial role in the development of subjectivity, constructing a sense of wholeness and totality that replaces fragmentation. The baby lacks coordination of his body, cannot speak, feels frustrated. Self-recognition invokes jouissance due to a sudden unbroken external representation, even if only on a superficial level. The reflected image is unified, complete. This is the beginning of narcissistic identity formation. Unable to control its body or its environment, the child sees reflected in the mirror a gestalt that promises a future wholeness. The child's psyche finds itself structured in terms of an alienating exteriority, seeing in the mirror an ideal image that leads to alienation. The image of wholeness is perceived as being placed outside the subject that functions as its internalized correlate. It is produced by identification with something other than the self. Central to the mirror stage is a type of imprinting, and future events repeat the original reflection. Lacan suggests that the mirror stage does not entirely disappear. It is a phase that occurs in early childhood, but remains as a template that forms the imaginary, understood in terms of human experience. Tarkovsky's mirror illustrates that the unconscious is structured like language, a discourse of the other that can be grasped by rhetorical analysis. The term primal scene appeared first in Freud's Wolfman case, but the notion was present in his work as early as 1896, evoked in Interpretation of Dreams. Primal scene is the initial witnessing by a child of a sex act, normally between parents, that is theorized as splintering up psychosexual development. The primal scene is observed or constructed as an enigmatic violent event not understood by the child, as the memory was experienced too early, returning as conversion symptoms or obsessions later in adulthood. There's a constant question of whether the primal scene was a fantasy or a real event. Freud later increased his emphasis on the child's imaginary interpretation of the scene, a sort of paradoxical representation and denial of the parent's familiar quality. Central to the primal scene is the feeling of overwhelming unknown, the trauma of the child's excess excitement, which he cannot process. In this particular dream sequence, the mother washes her hair. A shower of water bursts through the ceiling. Pieces of plaster fall in slow motion. Water runs in streams down the walls, signaling the uncovering of the Lacanian reel. Then the young mother looks into a clouded mirror and sees not her own reflection, but that of Tarkovsky's real mother, Maria Ivanovna. Tarkovsky uses this device in other films to suggest the merging of identities. Here, in a single image, the characters of wife and mother are fused. Time past and future, memory and prescience are captured in present time. The overwhelming unknown occurs within a familiar world, to which the child is bound by vital needs. There is no option of escape or to ward off anxiety. Tarkovsky's repeated dialogue with his father's poetry evokes a fluid postmodern subjectivity that questions the uniqueness and stability of one's identity. The mother and the wife of the narrator are played by the same actress, which does seem very Freudian and Oedipal. The narrator chooses his model of womanhood too faithfully, and his marriage breaks up as a consequence. Repetition, beyond a certain limit, is neurosis. It entails the symptom of reenacting a traumatic event or its circumstances continuously. As the Latin motto goes, to err is human, to persist is of the devil. Freud remarked, an instinct is an urge inherent in organic life to restore an earlier state of things, arriving eventually at his concept of the death drive, later known as thanatos. The vulnerable image of the mother struggling to feed her children is contrasted with the voluptuous, house-proud figure of the doctor's wife. The two irreconcilable worlds culminate in the scene with the cockerel. The doctor's wife asks the mother to kill the bird for dinner before she leaves. The mother's gaze finds an answer in the gaze of her former husband, who stands by her bed, half naked. The doctor's house, as a domain of the real, shot in color, merges with the room of the dream shot in black and white. The improbable levitation sequence, a desperate attempt to evade the cruelties of mundane life, is accompanied by a dove flying across the screen.